This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Parshas Vayishlach. Sometimes we have Shiurim on various topics. We sometimes discuss a topic, something we could learn, a lesson we could learn. Sometimes we discuss a mystical topic. Sometimes we discuss halacha l'maisa. We have a very varied range of topics that we discuss. And this evening we would like to discuss what we call Yesodei HaTorah, fundamental principles of Torah. And we'll see how fundamental it is understanding nevuah, understanding prophecy, understanding when prophecy must come true, understanding that prophecy may not always have to come true. And we begin with Parshas Vayishlach, the beginning of the Parsha. As you know, when we learned when we were kids, Esav was coming with 400 men, right? Fill in the blank. Yaakov davened to Hashem. Remember that? So Esav is approaching, and the pasuk tells us in Parak Lamed Beis, pasuk Ches, Vayira Yaakov me'oid vayetzer lo. Yaakov was very afraid. He was distressed. So what did Yaakov Avinu do? Vayachatz es ha'am asher itai. He divided his people. V'es hatzayin, the sheep, v'es habakar, the cattle, v'hagamalim, the camels, l'shnei machanois, into two camps. Yaakov Avinu was afraid. What was he afraid of? What was Yaakov Avinu afraid of? Rashi says on the spot, Vayira, Vayetzar, Vayira, Shema Yeharik. Yaakov Avinu was afraid that he may get killed. Esav is coming. Esav is coming not to give Yaakov a hug and a kiss. Esav is coming with 400 men. These are soldiers. They're coming with, bazookas, with rifles. They want to shoot Yaakov, destroy him. Yeah? To smithereens. Yaakov is afraid. Yaakov is scared. Yaakov is scared? Wait, does Yaakov have, short-term memory loss? Last week's Parsha, Parshas Vayetze, Hashem tells Yaakov, V'hinei anoichi imach, I'll be with you. Ushmarticha b'chol asher telech. I will guard you wherever you go. Not only that, V'hashivoisicha el haaretz hazois, el ha'adam hazois. I will return you to this land. Ki lo ya'ezavcha, I will not forsake you. Until I do what I said. So Hashem is telling Yaakov, listen up. I'm going to watch you. I'm going to make sure I'm with you. I'm going to make sure you return to Eretz Yisrael, and I will not stop protecting you until I fulfill what I promised. So what's Yaakov afraid of? He just had, in last week's Parsha, Hashem came to him. Hashem said, Shalom Aleichem Yaakov, how are you doing? Don't worry. Everything's going to be great. I'm going to take care of you. And Yaakov, immediately after, what's Yaakov's reaction? Vayira Yaakov, he's afraid. What's he afraid of exactly? He just got a promise from Hashem. Who asked this question? The Gemara asked this question. The Gemara Masechta Brachos, Daf Daled. If you come Sunday morning, that's what we're up to. We're about to learn this Gemara. Daf Daled, by the way, everyone is invited Sunday morning. We don't have Carlos and Gabby's. It's too early in the morning for that. But we do have a fully catered breakfast. I want to invite everybody to join us Sunday morning for Gemara Shiur Be'iyun. So the Gemara asks, in Masechta Brachos Daf Daled, Gemara says, Rabbi Yaakov Varidi Rami. Rabbi Yaakov Varidi asked the contradiction. Ksiv, it says in one pasuk, V'hinei anoichi imach ushmarticha b'chol asher telech. And one pasuk says that Hashem promises Yaakov, I will protect you. Ksiv, and there's another pasuk, Vayira Yaakov ma'od. Yaakov was very scared. He was afraid. So how do we reconcile that? Hashem says everything's going to be good, and the next words are, Yaakov's afraid. Says the Gemara, Amar, you know what Yaakov said? Shema yigroim hachet. Yaakov said, maybe a sin. Maybe I'll do a sin. And if I do a sin, that obviates God's promise. All bets are off. Yeah, Hashem told me I'm going to protect you. But you know what's going to happen if one time I say one word by Chazaras Hashatz? All bets are off. That's it. It's an Aveira. What's going to happen if one time I do something improper? All bets are off. So Yaakov was scared. Yeah, Hashem said everything's going to be okay. But ain't tzaddik v'aretz asher yasa tov lo. Nobody's perfect. And Yaakov Avinu was afraid that despite the fact Hashem gave him his personal guarantee, Shema yigroim hachet, maybe a sin will obviate God's promise. So far, so good. Yeah? Okay. Comes the Rambam, and the Rambam tells us a fundamental principle in prophecy. Yeah? Let's say a guy comes into the room. Yeah, he's walking in right now. You see? I'm just joking. He walks into the room. He goes up to the bima. He stands on the bima, and he says, Rabbi Glatstein, tomorrow, I want everyone to know there's going to be a big earthquake. If you don't do tshuva, there's going to be an earthquake. He said, what time? 3 o'clock. So everybody's watching with his, sing 2:58, 2:59, 3 o'clock. Guess what happens? Nothing. Is this individual a Navi Sheker? Is he a false prophet? Says the Ram, no. What do we do to the guy? Nothing. We'll give him shlishi on Shabbos. We don't do anything to him. Yeah? Why not? But he prophesied. He said, God came to me in a dream, and in the dream God told me tomorrow at 3 o'clock there's going to be an earthquake. So he's a false prophet. Says the Ram, he's not a false prophet. You know why? Because God is Arach HaPayim. Hashem is slow to get angry. And he accepts tshuva. So even though maybe, in fact, Hashem came to the Navi, and he said, tomorrow at 3 o'clock there's going to be an earthquake, Hashem changed his mind. Because Hashem saw the people changed, they repented, they did tshuva. So the fact that that the Navi predicted something bad is going to happen, that doesn't necessarily mean that if it doesn't happen, he's a Navi Sheker. But says the Rambam, what if the Navi comes and says that tomorrow at 2 o'clock, the Dow Jones is going to be 15,000. Yeah? Yeah, but nobody knows that, right? And tomorrow at 2 o'clock, Apple, 900. 900. Yeah? And what happens? Tomorrow comes, and Apple is still at whatever. And the Dow is still whatever. What do we do to this Navi? What do we do to the Navi? We kill him. We kill him. Yeah. We kill him. Why? He's a false prophet. Why is he a false prophet? Maybe, Hashem did tell him that, the stocks are going to go up. The only thing is, people didn't act properly. People did averos. Maybe, Hashem changed his mind. Says the Rambam, when a prophet comes and says something good is going to happen, it must happen. It has to happen. Because if Hashem tells a Navi that Taiva will happen, if Hashem gives a Navi a Besura Taiva, it must happen. And if it doesn't happen, this is a Navi Sheker. And once he's a Navi Sheker, we kill him. That's the rule of the Rambam. That's how the Rambam tells us we're able to test a Navi. If somebody says bad prophecy and it doesn't happen, he's off the hook. If someone says good prophecy and it doesn't happen, he's in big trouble. That's why if you remember your Navi, by the way, there's a very nice sefer out there. It's called Sefer Yirmiyahu. Yeah? Doesn't have any haskamas, but nevertheless, highly recommend learning it. In Parak Chav Ches, the Navi Yirmiyahu tells us about a conversation he had with another supposed Navi by the name of Hananiah ben Azar. And Yirmiyahu came to Klal Yisrael and he said, disaster is going to happen. And Hananiah ben Azar came to Klal Yisrael and he said, wonderful things are going to happen. And Yirmiyahu says to Hananiah, I want you to know, I'm in much better shape than you are. Because I said disaster is going to happen. If disaster doesn't happen, I'm off the hook. But you said good things are going to happen. If your predictions don't come true, you're in big trouble. And in fact, the Rambam is not making up this criteria of how to test the Navi. This criteria comes from a Gemara. The Gemara says in Brachos on Daf Zayin, Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Yossi, number 6 on your sheets, Kol dibur v'dibur sheyatza mipi HaKadosh Baruch Hu letayva afilu al tenai lechazar ba. If Hashem tells a Navi something good is going to happen, it must happen. Hashem will never change his mind. He'll never relent. He'll never revoke. He'll never take back. So what's the obvious problem? If nevuah l'taiva must come true, if a prophecy that is good must come true, so let's go back to Yaakov Avinu, good old Yaakov. At the beginning of the Parsha, Yaakov Avinu is afraid. What's he afraid of? He's afraid he's going to get killed, Rashi says. Why is he afraid he's going to get killed? Didn't Hashem promise him in last week's Parsha, Hine anochi imach, I'm going to be with you. Ushmaticha b'chasher telech, I'm going to guard you. Hashem said, good nevuah to Yaakov. Hashem said everything is going to be good. And we learned in the Rambam that if Hashem tells a Navi something good is going to happen, it must happen. And if it doesn't happen, and the Navi told us about it, the Navi's a Navi Sheker. So if Hashem told Yaakov, things will be all right, what was Yaakov afraid of? So the Gemara says he was afraid, Shema Yigrom Hachet. He was afraid of sin. What do you mean afraid of sin? If Hashem tells Nevuah L'Taiva, the Rambam says, it must come true. So what was Yaakov afraid of? It's a good question, right? Yeah, it's a very good question. Why was Yaakov scared? So there's another Rambam. This Rambam is in the Rambam's introduction to Mishnayos. And the Rambam again sets forth this principle, that if a Navi tells us prophecy, that something good is going to happen, if it doesn't happen, he's a Navi Sheker. If a Navi comes and says something bad is going to happen, and it doesn't happen, the Navi's off the hook. Ask the Rambam. Now take a look at number 7 on your sheets. We broke up this piece in the Rambam, from the Hakdama to the Parshas Mishnayos. We broke it up into 4 parts. We wanted to make it more user-friendly. So if you look in Gimel, right, of number 7, the Rambam asks, Aval Inyan Pachad Yaakov. Why was Yaakov afraid? Why was Yaakov afraid? Hashem told him, so don't give me this Shema Yigrom Achit business that Yaakov Avinu was afraid. Yeah, Hashem told him something good is going to happen, but he did an Avera, so maybe he's not going to deserve it, because we just set forth a principle. If Hashem tells a Navi something good is going to happen, it has to happen. Okay, you ready? If you came here tonight just to hear this rule, your knowledge of Torah has just been made a little bit fuller. Okay? Says the Rambam. Yesh ladas, in number Daled. She'inyin ze eino ella bein HaKadosh Baruch Hu bein HaNavi. That's between Hashem and the Navi. If Hashem tells a Navi, you're going to win the lottery, Powerball, yeah? $500 million?
550.
550? Yeah. You got Nevuah? 550? If it doesn't happen, it might not happen. If you hear from Hashem something good is going to happen, it might not happen. When do we have a rule that Nevuah must occur if it's L'Taiva? That's if the Navi then relays it to someone else. You hear that? If Hashem tells a Navi, you're going to be safe, he may not be safe. If Hashem tells a Navi, you're going to return to Eretz Yisrael, he may not return to Eretz Yisrael. If Hashem tells a Navi, I will not forsake you, Hashem may forsake him. But if Hashem tells a Navi, go tell Klal Yisrael, this is going to happen. Once the Navi repeats to Klal Yisrael, or to anyone, the Nevuah, if it's L'Taiva, it must happen. This is the principle of the Rambam, when prophecy must come true, when it doesn't have to come true. If it's personal, if it's Hashem calls the Navi on the Navi phone, says, I want you to know this is going to happen, and it's wonderful, the Navi has a right to be afraid. Maybe he'll be undeserving, maybe he won't be worthy of the prophecy coming to fruition. But once the Navi repeats it over to someone else, take it to the bank. It's guaranteed to happen. Okay? So you'll ask, what's the logic of that? That makes no sense at all. You're telling me secondhand information is more accurate than first-hand information. If Hashem tells the Navi something's going to happen, yeah, we don't know if it's going to happen or not. But once the Navi says it over, now it has to happen. So the Mizrahi and the Levush Ha'ira both explain, yes, second-hand information in this case is more accurate than first-hand information. Says the Levush, says the Mizrahi, you know why once the Navi says over the information, it's guaranteed to happen? Because Hashem gave a topic in the Chumash. It's called testing a Navi. And Hashem said, if a Navi tells you something bad is going to happen, it may not happen. But if a Navi tells you something good is going to happen, it has to happen because I am giving you the undeniable determination of how do you know if a Navi is true or not, right? Let's say somebody comes in, he comes into this room and he says, Hashem just told me that I want everyone over here to say the whole Tehillim tonight. So what do we tell him? We say, get lost, bug off. I have to say the whole Tehillim? I want to go home and go to sleep. I had a good meal, so I want to go to sleep when I get home. No, Hashem said I have to say the whole Tehillim. I said, go fly a kite, say the whole Tehillim. Tell it to the Marines, go say the Tehillim. No, he says, really, Hashem came to me. So how do we know if the guy is true or not? If he predicts the future, and that something good is going to happen, then we know he means business. So Hashem had to give us some way to determine if a Navi is true or not. And what's going to happen if a Navi comes and says something good is going to happen, and it doesn't happen? Let's say Yirmiyah HaNavi would come in and say something good is going to happen. If it doesn't happen, what are people going to start saying? Nevuah is not true, prophecy is not true, and people are going to question the Torah. So Hashem had to give a way for us to know whether Nevuah is true or not. But if it's just a personal conversation between Hashem and the Navi, it's not guaranteed to happen. What's going to happen? Imagine if Hashem tells a Navi, I promise you're going to win the lottery. So if the Navi doesn't win the lottery, nothing bad's going to happen. The Navi's just going to think to himself, I must have done an Aveira. I must have spoke one time by Kaddish, a terrible, terrible thing. I must have done something improper. So the Navi is not going to question Hashem. But if it's out in the open, and people are going to start hearing about the prophecy of the Navi, and they're going to find out that his prophecy didn't come true, they're going to question the whole institution of prophecy. And therefore, the Rambam sets forth a great rule that once a Navi says over prophecy, l'taiva, it must come true. Got it? That's the rule. Okay? So we have 3 rules we need to remember. If a Navi says over prophecy that something bad is going to happen, it doesn't have to happen. If Hashem tells a Navi something good is going to happen, it doesn't have to happen. But if Hashem tells a Navi something good is going to happen, and the Navi repeats it, it must happen. Okay? That's how prophecy works. In case we have any, neophyte prophets over here, anybody in the prophecy training, now you know that if you're going to say something l'taiva, you got to watch out. Okay. Now we're going to take this rule. You got it? Now grab a hold of that rule. Nekoid klal ze biyadcha. Grab a hold of this rule. Because if you know this rule, you'll understand many episodes in Chumash. Let's begin. Okay? The Meshech Chachma of Meir Simcha lived in the city of Dvinsk. The end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century. Now, if you would go to Dvinsk, you know how big the city of Dvinsk was? You're riding on a wagon, and you started saying Ashrei. By the time you got up to Soymech Hashem L'chol HaNoiflim, you were already out of the city. That's how big the city of Dvinsk was. Okay. I heard that from somebody who heard that from Rav Meir Simcha. Okay. Says Rav Meir Simcha of Dvinsk, take a look on your sheets in number 11. Hashem comes to Avraham Avinu and he says, Avraham, guess what? I have good news. You know that country in the Middle East that everybody's fighting over? Everybody wants it, I'm giving it to you and your children. And Avraham said, children? I don't have any children. No, I'm not going to give you children. And what does the pasuk say? Tehemin b'Hashem. Avraham believed. Vayachsheva Hashem l'tzedakah. Hashem considered it a merit that Avraham believed. And guess what the next pasuk is? Vayomer Hashem Elokim ba'ma'ida ki rashena. Hashem, how do I know that I'm going to inherit Eretz Yisrael? What? Because Hashem just told you you're going to inherit Eretz Yisrael. What do you mean, how do I know? Hashem just said, Avraham, Shalom Aleichem, you're going to get Eretz Yisrael. You and Yitzchak and Yaakov. And then Avraham believed. And then the next pasuk is, Avraham said, how do I know I'm going to get Eretz Yisrael? Excuse me? Hashem, did you hear one word I just said? Yeah. I just told you you're going to get Eretz Yisrael. And Avraham says, how do I know I'm going to get Eretz Yisrael? So, says in Meshech Chachma, Avraham was completely sure Yitzchak would get Eretz Yisrael. Avraham was completely sure Yaakov would get Eretz. But Avraham was unsure that he would get Eretz Yisrael. You know why? Because Avraham knew as soon as he went home, he would then tell the Nevuah to Sarah. And once he tells the Nevuah to Sarah and to Yitzchak, it has to come true to them. But regarding him, Hashem told him. And when Hashem tells you Nevuah, it doesn't have to come true. So that's why the pasuk says, Hashem Elokim b'ma'ida ki rashena. How do I know I'm going to get Eretz Yisrael. I know Yitzchak's going to get it because I'm going to tell him. And if Yitzchak hears from me, I'm a Navi after all. Abraham was a Navi. If Abraham tells Yitzchak that Yitzchak, you're going to get Eretz Yisrael, Yitzchak has to get Eretz Yisrael. But Abraham doesn't have to get Eretz Yisrael, because did Abraham hear from anyone that he's going to get Eretz Yisrael? No. He heard from Hashem. Nevuah that you hear from Hashem doesn't have to come true. Abraham was afraid. Shema Yigrom HaChet. Let's move on. Listen to this. Yeah, Hashem tells Abraham a little bit later, another report. Good news, you know? He says, Abraham, guess what? You're going to have a son. What was Abraham's reaction? Vayitzchak. He laughed. Then Abraham tells Sarah, you're going to have a child. And what is Sarah's reaction? Vatitzchak Sarah bekir balim. She laughed. And Hashem comes to Abraham and he says, Abraham, lama zet tzachaka Sarah leimar ha'afum nam eled v'anizakanti. Why did Sarah laugh? Why did Sarah laugh? What? And Abraham said, oh, thank you, Hashem, I believe you. No, Abraham also didn't believe. He laughed. They both laughed. Abraham vayitzchak, Sarah vatitzchak. They both laughed. So why is only Sarah being criticized? Why isn't Abraham being criticized? So if you remember, Rashi quotes the Targum that when it says that Abraham laughed, it means vachadi. He was happy. He was happy. He didn't laugh incredulously. He laughed out of joy. But when Sarah laughed, the Targum says v'chayches. She laughed incredulously. Says Rav Meir Simcha, you don't have to say that. Laughing means laughing. When you laugh, you laugh. You don't have to translate it differently. You know why Hashem criticized Sarah and didn't criticize Abraham? Because Abraham had a right to laugh. Because when Hashem told Abraham Nevuah, you're going to have a child, you know what Abraham thought to himself? Yeah, I'm going to have a child. But I don't deserve a child. I'm going to have a child. Shema Yigrom HaChet. He couldn't believe it. Because if Hashem tells a Navi prophecy, it may not come true. But Sarah, why did Sarah laugh? Because Sarah heard from an established Navi that she's going to have a child. Who did Sarah hear from? Sarah heard from Abraham. So if Sarah heard from Abraham, that has to come true. So there's no criticism on Abraham because Abraham heard it from Hashem. A Nevuah you hear from Hashem does not have to come true. But Sarah heard it from the Navi. Nevuah that you hear from a Navi must come true. Let's go to Parshas Toldos, okay? Number 16. Vayetar Yitzchak LaHashem L'noichach ishtai. Yitzchak davened to Hashem L'noichach ishtai. Ki akarahi, because she was barren. What does the word L'noichach mean? Yeah. What? With.
Opposite.
What does L'noichach mean? Opposite. Rashi says the word L'noichach means opposite. Right? Yitzchak was in one corner and Rivka was in the other corner. Opposite. The Rashbam says that's not what L'noichach means. The Rashbam says, you know what L'noichach means? Look at number 17. Bishvil. Because, on the sake, on behalf of. In other words, Yitzchak davened to Hashem for his wife. For his wife? What, and he didn't need someone to daven for him? He didn't daven for himself? Yitzchak was impotent. He was an akar. So why is he davening for Rivka? He should be davening for himself and for Rivka. Right? According to Rashi, I understand. He's davening opposite his wife. But according to the Rashbam, he's davening for his wife? What's he davening for his wife for? He's not davening for himself? Says Rav Meir Simcha, he's not davening for himself. You know why he's not davening for himself? Because he was guaranteed to have children. Why was he guaranteed to have children? Because Hashem told Abraham, you're going to have a son, Yitzchak, and I'm going to establish my covenant with Yitzchak and his future descendants. So Yitzchak heard from a Navi that Yitzchak is going to have children, so he doesn't have to daven. It's guaranteed. It's in the bank. Yitzchak doesn't have to daven for himself. But Rivka never heard from a Navi that she's going to have children, so maybe Yitzchak will have children from a different wife, from a different woman. But for Rivka, there are no guarantees. So Yitzchak davens specifically for Rivka. Points out the Meshech Chachma. You ever notice? As soon as Yitzchak is born, as soon as Yaakov and Esav are born, all of a sudden Yitzchak is all afraid of Avimelech. Avimelech's going to kill him. He was never afraid until now. Why all of a sudden he has 2 kids is he afraid? Because once Yaakov and Esav are born, all bets are off. The only thing Hashem promised him is that he's going to have children. Now he had children. So now he has to be scared for his life. Until he had children, he was never afraid of anything. Because he had a guarantee from the Navi, Abraham, that Hashem is going to give him children. He was never scared of anything. And therefore, he was not afraid until Yaakov and Esav were born. But Abraham, as soon as he goes down to Mitzrayim, he's scared for his life. Why? Didn't Hashem tell him, Lech lecha, uveirachticha, and I'll give you money and I'll give you fame? It's not worth anything. Shema yigram achet. Abraham heard it directly from Hashem. And if you hear a nevuah directly from Hashem, you got to be scared. You have to be scared. Shema yigram achet. This is the rule of the Rambam. I'll give you one more example. Okay? One more example. There was a man by the name of Pinchas. Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. Right? What did Pinchas do? He saw Zimri. He saw a Cosby. He was a Kanoi. He took his sword and he stabbed them both to death. And what was his reward? V'hai salai ulazarei acharav bris kahunas. All Kohanim Gedolim came forth from Pinchas. Why did Kahuna come forth from Pinchas? So Chazal say, Pinchas removed Hashem's wrath, not just from Cosby, but from the entirety of Klal Yisrael, forever and ever and ever. So Hashem wanted to give Pinchas eternal reward. And what was the eternal reward? All Kohanim Gedolim came forth from Pinchas. Ask the Meshech Chachma. It's very strange. Who told Pinchas that he's going to have Kohanim Gedolim come forth from him? Moshe. What do you need Moshe for? Pinchas was a Navi. Why does Hashem say, Lachein Emor, Hineni Noisin Levrisi Shalom? You, Moshe, Hashem tells Moshe, tell Pinchas. Why is Hashem playing telephone? Why is Hashem telling Moshe, Moshe, tell Pinchas? Go to Pinchas directly. You know what the answer is? Because Hashem wanted to give Pinchas everlasting reward that would never be revoked. And if Hashem would come to Pinchas and say, Pinchas, all future Kohanim are going to come out from you, all Kohanim Gedolim, what would happen in the times of the second Beis HaMikdash when the institution of the Kahuna Gedolah was something that the Kohanim Gedolim bought and they didn't deserve it anymore? So Hashem would take back the promise. So Hashem said, but I don't want to do that. I want to give Pinchas everlasting reward. Therefore Hashem turns to Moshe and says, Moshe, Lachein Emor. Therefore you tell him. Once you tell him, it has to come true. Okay? So we have given 5 examples in the Chumash where if a Navi tells another Navi, it must come true. But if Hashem tells a Navi directly, there is room, there's wiggle room. It may not come true. Number 1, Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu, why was he afraid? Didn't Hashem promise him everything would be good? Hashem promised him. A Navi didn't promise him. Why was Avram Avinu questioning Hashem? Because Hashem told him directly. He didn't hear it from a Navi. Why is Hashem criticizing Sarah, not Abraham? Because Sarah heard it from the Navi. Abraham heard it from Hashem. Why is Yitzchak davening for Rivka and not for himself? Because Yitzchak heard it from Abraham. Rivka didn't hear it from anybody. Why is Hashem telling Moshe to tell Pinchas? Because Hashem wanted the Nevuah to be unbreakable. Okay, these are 5 examples. Okay, that's part 1 of the Shiur. Ready? Part 2. Here's the problem. Anybody here want to be a Navi? Anybody want to be a Navi? No. Yeah. What do you have to do to be a Navi? The only thing you need to do is you have to have kol malos sechlios and most midos tayvos. Yeah? What does that mean? The Gemara says if you want to be a prophet, you have to be a chacham, a gibar, and an ashir. You have to be smart, strong, and wealthy. Okay, so smart, I know everybody thinks they're smart, so that we're all good, right? Smart. What does it mean to be a gibar? So the Rambam says gibar doesn't mean you could bench press. Gibar means you could conquer the Yetzer Hara. When the Yetzer Hara tries to pull you, you stand kovesh es Yitzra. What does it mean to be an Asher? Be happy with your lot. Be happy with your lot. So you got to be complete when it comes to intellectual capacity. How about when it comes to midos? Says the Rambam, you got to be pretty good. You don't have to be batting 1,000, but you got to be batting, like 950. Okay? You have to be pretty good. Says the Rambam, do you have to be perfect? The Rambam says you don't have to be perfect. How do you know you don't have to be perfect? So the Rambam says, I'll prove it to you. Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu wasn't perfect. Where do we find Yaakov Avinu is not perfect? The Rambam says, Parshas Vayishlach. We're in Parshas Vayishlach. Vayira, Yaakov, Me'oid, Vayetzela. Yaakov was afraid. What's he afraid of? What's he afraid of? Says the Rambam, the fact that Yaakov was afraid, that demonstrates that a Navi doesn't have to be perfect. Say what? What? The Rambam is saying? The Rambam is criticizing Yaakov Avinu? We just spent the last 30 minutes explaining that Yaakov Avinu, even though Hashem told him everything will be okay, he had the right to be afraid. Why? Shema Yigraim Hachet. We've just brought 5 proofs that if Hashem tells a Navi everything will be okay, you can't trust him. You never know. And yet the Rambam is saying, the same Rambam who said that if a Navi hears something directly from Hashem, he is allowed to be concerned the promise won't come true. The same Rambam says Yaakov was wrong for being afraid. The Gemara says he was entitled to be scared. The Rambam says he was entitled to be scared. Shema Yigram Achet. And now the Rambam is criticizing Yaakov Avinu? How do we understand that? You hear the question? It's what we call a stira in the Rambam. The Rambam told us that if Hashem tells a Navi prophecy, it may not come true because maybe the prophet doesn't deserve the prophecy to come true. And the Rambam writes, this is the Rambam in the Shemona Prakim. The Shemona Prakim is the Rambam's introduction to Pirkei Avos. The Rambam says, a Navi does not have to be perfect. Case in point, Yaakov Avinu. What do you mean? Yaakov was perfect. What did he do wrong? He was afraid. We just said, if Hashem tells a Navi prophecy, it may not happen. Shema Yigrom Hachet. So this question is raised by the Chesed Li Avraham, one of the commentaries on the Rambam in the Shemona Prakim. Comes Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, Hashem Yimkaim Damai. And Rabbi Chanan wants to explain why there is no contradiction in the Rambam. You know, when the Chafetz Chaim was planning on going to Eretz Yisrael, they said, Chafetz Chaim, how could you leave us? You're the Gadol Hadar. I understand that it's a mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael. But, it's a mitzvah. But you're leaving your flock. He said, don't worry. You have Rabbi Chanan. Okay, so this is Rabbi Chanan Wasserman. Rabbi Chanan says, there's a pasuk in Tehillim that says, Toiv lachzos b'Hashem mi b'tayach b'nedivim. It's better to take shelter in Hashem than to trust in nedivim. What are nedivim? What does it mean, lachzos? What does it mean, mi b'tayach? What is lachzos? What is mi b'tayach? And who are the nedivim? Let me tell you who nedivim are. Nedivim are people come to you and say, oh yeah, I think things are really going to work out. We're going to have you in this job in no time, and we're going to be paying you this salary. Don't worry about it. Don't worry. Things are right. They make promises to you. They make guarantees. They give you their word. And presumably, if they're telling you this and this is going to happen, you could rely on that. Hashem could also make promises. Yeah, Hashem could come to a Navi and he says everything's going to be okay. But sometimes Hashem doesn't tell us everything is going to be okay. I'm pretty sure most of us over here, not everyone, most of us over here, Hashem has not come to us and said, Rabbi Yid, don't worry about the future. You'll have parnasa, you'll have good health. Don't worry about it. I don't think anyone here ever got a letter in the mail from Shamayim with those words. But David HaMelech is saying, it is better, lachasois b'Hashem, it's better with no guarantees and no promises and no word from Hashem to on your own throw your towel in with Hashem, throw your chips with Hashem, bank on Hashem, trust in Hashem with no promise, than to trust in people who promise. Toiv lachsois b'Hashem. This is how the Vilna Gaon understands it. Better to trust in Hashem who never promised you anything, than to trust in a basar v'dam, than to trust in a human being who promises you things. Okay? And I think this is something everybody knows from experience. Right? You're better off trusting Hashem with no promises than to trust in people who promise things to you. So says Rabbi Glatstein, what do you see from here? That there are two levels of trusting in Hashem. When He tells you something, and even if He doesn't tell you something, you trust in Him out of bitachon. Says Rabbi Chanan, the two Rambams are talking about two absolutely separate things. The Rambam, in his introduction to Mishnayos, he wants to know, why was Yaakov afraid? But Hashem promised him, everything will be okay. You know what the answer to that is? Hashem promised him. He didn't hear it from a Navi. Hashem promised him, Shema Yigor Machet. Even the promise of Hashem to a Navi, it's only if the Navi deserves it, not if the Navi becomes unworthy of it. So Rabbi Chanan said, that's beautiful, that's wonderful. If Hashem promises something to a Navi, it may not happen. And Yaakov was not criticized for being scared, even though Hashem promised him. But you know why Yaakov was being criticized? Because even if Hashem promised Yaakov Avinu absolutely nothing, he still shouldn't have been scared. Why? Because he should have trusted in Hashem that Hashem would take care of him. But what do you mean? He's about to face a very dangerous situation. Who knows what's going to happen to what Esav's going to do to him? Maybe who knows? Trust in Hashem, that Hashem will come through for you. Yeah, but the promise is obviated. He promised me something, and Yaakov Avinu learned the Rambam. Yaakov knew what the Rambam says in the Hakdama to Parshas Mishnayos, that if Hashem tells you something directly, there are no guarantees. Of course there are no guarantees. I don't need a guarantee. Bitachon doesn't need Hashem to come to you and say, things will be good, even without hearing those words. A Jew is obligated to feel secure. Yeah, you're not supposed to be nervous in life. You're not supposed to be uneasy. People are very worried. You're not supposed to worry. You're worried about the future? Hashem will take care of you. David HaMelech says, a beautiful pasuk in Tehillim. David HaMelech says, Im lo shivisi v'daimamti nafshi ki gamol alei imai ka gamol alei nafshi. You know what David HaMelech says bitachon is? Bitachon is the baby who's nursing from his mother, and he's suckling from his mother. Is the baby worried, maybe I'm not going to have enough food, I'm starting to eat. Who knows, maybe there's not going to be enough of this. Is the baby afraid? Of course not. The baby doesn't think twice. He knows. The baby rests secure. There's no, calm, cool, collect. There's no worries. David HaMelech says, Kagamo, like this nursing baby. Alai nafshi. That's what my soul is like. Why is David HaMelech so secure? Hashem never told him, he's going to have what he needs. Hashem doesn't have to tell you. Hashem tells you, that's a promise. A promise, Shema Yigor Machet. Says Rabbi Chanan, you know why Yaakov is criticized in the Shemina Prakim of the Rambam? Not because he was afraid the promise wouldn't come true. He was entitled to think the promise would not come true. What he's criticized for is, you don't need a promise. You should have bitachon in Hashem. So now you'll ask a question, trust in Hashem. You're telling me that if Hashem comes to me and says everything will be okay, there are no guarantees. Because maybe I'm not deserving of Hashem keeping that promise. So if I'm not deserving of Hashem keeping the promise, how do I have the right to trust in Hashem? Maybe I'm not deserving of His kindness. Right? Or in other words, what you could ask is, what's bitachon? I'm trusting in Hashem, me? Ain't sadik ba'aretz asher yasa tov v'layachta. Everybody does averos. Everybody could. Is anybody more worthy than Yaakov Avinu? Yaakov Avinu thought maybe he didn't avera. All of us certainly know that we have things on our credit that we may not be proud of. So how could anyone put their trust in Hashem? So what do you see from here? Says Rabbi Chanan Vasemin, even if a person is unworthy, and a person has chatan, and a person has avonos, and a person has peshanim, and a person has done things that are not proper, he has the right to put his faith in Hashem that Hashem is going to make things work out for the best. Really? But I don't deserve it. Me? Says the Chafetz Chaim, a very beautiful idea. Chafetz Chaim says that in Parsha Shlach, we have the machlokes between the 10 Meraglim and Yeshua and Kalev. We spoke this out in the past a number of times. The 10 Meraglim come back and they say, nah, it's a bad land. Why? Because they say, look at these big giants, these guys, these ogres. They're 100 feet tall. We're going to walk into the land. They're going to step on us. That will be the end of us. Yeah, but Hashem told you that you're going to conquer them. So why didn't they believe that they would be able to conquer Eretz Yisrael? You know what the Meraglim thought? The Meraglim didn't understand what bitachon was. They thought, if you want to trust in Hashem, to be confident that things are going to work out for you, you have to be like a tzaddik gomer. You have to be perfect. And since no one's perfect, how can anyone be sure that Hashem's going to make things work out for them? So that's why the Meraglim said, of course Hashem promised us Eretz, but Shema Yigrom HaChet. So Yehoshua and Kalev come and they save the day. You know what they say? They say you're making a mistake. Hashem doesn't say to a person, I will save you if you're a tzaddik. You know what Hashem says? I won't save you if you're going to rebel against me. But as long as a person is basically a good Jew, and he tries his best, and he's not trying to openly rebel against Hashem, he has the right, I'll read you the words of the Chafetz Chaim, he has the right to say, Hashem, I know that you will make everything work out for me. Even if you're not a tzaddik gomer. That's bitachon. That's what bitachon. Bitachon is not, I trust in Hashem, but the thing is, I'm a bum, so I don't think life's going to work out for me. No. Bitachon is, even though I might be a little bit of a bum, I still, Hashem, come through. Come through. Look what the Chafetz Chaim writes. Beautiful words. Look at number 30. Chafetz Chaim writes, Kolzman, he says, Chafetz Chaim says on the third line in number 30, V'lazeh simu Yoshua v'Kalev. These are the concluding words of Yoshua and Kalev. V'amru, Ach b'Hashem al timroidu. Not you have to be a tzaddik, just the opposite. Just don't be a rebel. Don't openly rebel. V'cholzman she'ein adam moired b'HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As long as a person does not openly rebel, lakar mitzvahs b'kavana. Now that doesn't mean that a person could do an avera and say, I have bitachon Hashem, you're not going to punish me. No, you're not off the hook. But there's a certain uneasiness. People are worried. Naturally, human beings are worried about the future. And they don't think, they're worried maybe Hashem's not going to make things, work out for them. No. A person, even if they're not the biggest tzaddik in the world, says the Chafetz Chaim, yuchal lekavos l'chol toiv. They can anticipate everything that is good. Even if they're not a tzaddik. The Meshech Chachma, we already did 4 Meshech Chachmas tonight. Let's do one more. Meshech Chachma says like this. Meshech Chachma says, we know in the Midbar, how did Klal Yisrael make a living? Yeah, what did they do? Doctors, lawyers, accountants, pharmacists, rabbis. What did they do? Nothing. Kailal, they were in Kailal. So how did they make a living? The man came down from the Shemayim. So the pasuk says that when you think about the man, remember that the man came down when I took you out of Mitzrayim. Ask the Meshech Chachma, who cares when the man fell down? The man came down when it came down. We all know. Says the Meshech Chachma. Later on in history, a Jew may say, I have bitachon in Hashem. The thing is, it's I don't really trust in Hashem because I know I'm not worthy of such a thing. So says the Meshech Chachma, remember when God gave you the man from Shemayim? When was that? When you came out of Mitzrayim. What level were you on when you came out of Mitzrayim? You were Mem Teshari Tuma. You were no mitzvos. You were around the area. You had nothing. You weren't tzaddikim. You were on the lowest possible level. And yet, every day, you had food, you had shelter, you had everything you needed. So next time you're worried, what's going to be? By the way, I'm remembering now, tonight, by the way, is the yahrzeit of Rav David Leibowitz. Zecher Tzak Lebracha. There's a big yahrzeit here in Yeshiva Chafetz Chaim for Rav David's yahrzeit. So, in honor of the yahrzeit, we have to say over that Rav David Leibowitz always used to say, what's going to be? The word, and Yeshiva Leibowitz said, Rav David never said, what's going to be. Don't say what's going to be. Everything's going to be good. How do we know? Because Hashem gave you the man, not after Hashem gave you the Torah and you're all big tzaddikim. When you came out of Mitzrayim. B'ha'itzi oisam me'eretz Mitzrayim. The Gemara says in Bava Metzia that Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, right? So we mentioned in the past, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi was the Gilgal of Yaakov Avinu, right? We said Nasi Nitzot Shel Yaakov Avinu. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, at the end of his life, he had Yisurim. Why did he have Yisurim? Because he was walking down the street and a cow came into his cloak, and Rabbi said, "Zil, get lost, lekach noitzarta." Right? Zil l'shchita, go be shechted. Lekach noitzarta, that's what you were created for. And the Gemara says, because Rabbi told the cow, go be shechted, Rabbi had Yisurim for the rest of his life. So the question is, what did Rabbi... So, the animal rights activists, they love this Gemara, right? Rabbi had Yisurim because he wanted to shech the animal. But the only thing is, the Gemara tells us in Brachas and Daf Yud Zayin, soif behemos l'shchita. That's what animals are for. Animals are for eating them. That's why Hashem made animals. So what did Rabbi do wrong? Rabbi told the animal, go be shechted? That's what the animal... Imagine, if this animal could only end up on the plate of, Reb Chaim Kanievsky, what that animal wouldn't do to be on Reb Chaim's plate. I mean, what did Rabbi do wrong? Rabbi said, lekach noitzarta? Yeah, lekach noitzarta. So Rav Nosson Wachtfogel, who was the mashgiach, the Lakewood Yeshiva, Zechatzak Levrach, he says like this. There's nothing wrong with what Rabbi said. Of course, animals are supposed to be shechted. But when the animal comes under your cloak, seeking protection in your sail, in your shade, in your shadow, he doesn't deserve it. But when he comes to you, now you have the moral obligation to protect him. Because if someone throws their chips in with you and puts their trust into you, you're obligated to protect them. Says Rav Nosson Wachtfogel, if Rebbe was obligated to protect the cow who didn't deserve it, then if we say to Hashem, we're coming under your coat, alachas kama v'kama, the Rebbeinu Shalom is required to protect us. So from all of this we see, you don't have to be a major tzaddik to have bitachon. I'll give you one more example that the Chavetz Chaim said. Parshas Vayera. Remember the case, the Malachim come to Lot's house, and the whole city surrounds the house, and they're bang, let them out, let the guests out, v'nei doisam, we'll take care of them. And what does Lot say? Does Lot say, no, you're not, you're gonna, right? You know what they wanted to do to these Malachim, right? Now Rashi says, they were gonna take care of them, right? Yeah, they're gonna, yeah. So, what does Lot say? Does Lot say, what? You're gonna do that to them? That's a capital crime. That's a violation of the Shem Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. Lot doesn't say. Does Lot say, what a terrible thing? No. You know what Lot says? Lot says, you're right. The law of the land is, when guests come, we molest them. But the only problem is, Al Kain Bo B'Tzel Kairasi. But they came under my shade. So I can't give them to you. I know I'm violating the law. But if people, says the Chavetz Chaim, if Lot in his Farkrumta mind understood, so the Chavetz Chaim says, that if people come under your roof, you are obligated to protect them. If a Jew says, Ribbanu Shalom, maybe I don't deserve it, but I'm coming under your protection, alachas kama v'kama, the Ribbanu Shalom will protect us. And that is what Rabbi Chanan says. So we have two parts of the shir. The first part is, why was Yaakov afraid? But Hashem promised him. Hashem promised him. He didn't hear it from a Navi. And the promise that you hear from Hashem yourself, there are no guarantees. Shema Yigrom Achet. That's why Abraham said, B'ma'ida ki Yirashema. That's why Hashem criticized Sarah, not Abraham. That's why Yitzchak davened for Rivka, not himself. That's why Hashem told Moshe to tell Pinchas. But now we have part two. And part two is, yes, Abraham understood that the promise was obviated. But now Yaakov is being criticized. Because even though the promise is obviated, what about bitachon? And for bitachon, we don't say Shema Yigrom Achet. We don't say maybe you're unworthy, maybe you're undeserving. Because bitachon gives a person the license to have peace of mind despite their unworthiness. And says the Chavetz Chaim, Betach v'Hashem, if a person puts their trust in Hashem, and Rav Chanan also says, Chesed Yisai v'Venu, they'll be surrounded by Chesed, not only if they deserve to be surrounded by Chesed, even if they don't deserve to be surrounded by Chesed. Vayisai, Thank you for coming.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.